It's the Believe in Texans podcast brought to you by FanDuel. And man, for the offseason, a whole bunch of movement as Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans are at the combine. Few things happened today. One, the biggest and most notable thing, Gerrod Johnson, quarterback's coach for CJ Stroud, low these past 3 years, decides to mutually part ways with the Texans. Never know when a mutual breakup is genuinely mutual or not, but we'll get into that. There's a trade by the Titans that's very notable, might help the Texans out in the short term at least. And then the wrap up of everything that Nick Caserio talked about over the last couple days at the combine. Oh, and the Texans' new facility. But as we sit right now, the Texans are a plus 950 to win the AFC Championship on FanDuel. That makes them tied with the Broncos for the sixth favorite to win the AFC. 5 teams above them in order are the Ravens and the Bills, tied at first, then the Chargers, the Patriots, and the Chiefs. Set them in your sights, mow them down. It's good to know that the Texans have beaten the Chiefs, beaten the Chargers, beaten the Ravens. They still haven't beaten Lamar Jackson. Tiny little detail there. Beating the Bills up and down all over the place when it's at NRG Stadium. And then, of course, the Patriots, which, as we all know, as we're all still upset by, could have beaten the Patriots if the quarterback didn't turn the ball over 4 times. We'll get into that later. Jarrod Johnson, the quarterback's coach for CJ Stroud, not just in Houston, but also, having a relationship with him going back to the Elite 11 days. First reported by Adam Schefter, the Texans and QB coach Gerrod Johnson have parted ways. Aaron Wilson then went on to report, quote, now former Texans quarterbacks coach Gerrod Johnson, after parting ways with the team mutually, has multiple coaching options per sources to consider after the Humble native worked for the hometown the past 3 years. Aaron also reported that the senior offensive assistant, Jerry Schuplinski, steps in to coach CJ Stroud in tandem with Nick Caserio. A lot to unwrap here. Oh, boy. We'll get to Jerry Schuplinski later. As far as CJ Stroud himself and how much Gerrod Johnson has helped him or perhaps hasn't helped him over these last few years, impossible to say. Man, position coaches are, in some ways, it's all left up to speculation as to how much of an effect they have on a player. It's kind of like hitting coaches in baseball. Was Alex Bregman a great hitter because Alex Bregman is a great hitter, or is it because Alex Cintron and Troy Snitker helped him along the way? I think Alex Bregman's probably just a great hitter, and he's got his own personal hitting coaches and everything. The Astros decided to part ways with those 2 hitting coaches in the offseason, and you just don't know. I used the example this morning on the radio show of the Rod Wright, the defensive line coach for the Texans. Look, I know defensive linemen and how they're coached, and I've watched Rod Wright coach. And then I've also seen various defensive linemen really be the best version of themselves with the Houston Texans. So that's a credit to not just those players themselves, but Rod Wright, D'Amico Ryans, Matt Burke, the scheme fit, all of those things. I feel pretty good about that. With a quarterback, a lot tougher to say, okay, hey, how much of Tom Brady was a product of Josh McDaniels or Bill Belichick or Tom House, the guy he worked with in the offseason? A lot harder to dole out the credit for quarterback coaches of individual quarterbacks. Whatever the process has been, it hasn't been all that great the last couple of years in terms of building on what CJ Stroud did in his rookie year. So there's blame, whether you want to blame Gerrod Johnson or you want to blame Nick Caserio or Bobby Slowick before him. Something needed to change, or perhaps maybe, we don't know. There could be speculation all over the place. Maybe Gerrod Johnson and D'Amico or Nick Caserio just didn't see eye to eye. What you have in Jerry Schuplinski, who's an in-house hire, was with the Texans last year, is a guy that went to John Carroll. So, look, Nick went to John Carroll. Nick Caserio went to John Carroll. And we know that he seems to have an affinity for guys that share his alma mater. By no means do I look at John Carroll as like, oh, wow, they're pumping out awesome coaches and personnel people that you couldn't find anywhere else in America. Whatever. He was with the Patriots from 2013 to 2018. Then from 2019 to 2025, in various 1 and 2 year stints, he was with the Dolphins, the Giants, the Raiders, the Rams, and the Texans. So 5 different teams over the course of 6 years. Is he going to be the magical elixir that takes CJ Stroud to the next level? it's never one thing. Maybe he brings something different to the table. He's already been working with the team for a year. I think, as far as I know, Bill Lazor, who's a senior offensive assistant, is still on staff, and hope that this is one of the things that changes things for the better. One thing that came up immediately before I saw the Aaron Wilson report about Jerry Schuplinski being the new quarterbacks coach, if that ends up being exactly how it's set up, the text line lit up with suggestions for Case Keenum. And I 100% get that. I myself said Case Keenum before we even said the text line on the radio show, because we all know, man, CJ's most promising year, he had veteran quarterback Case Keenum in the building with him as a mentor, as perhaps a shoulder to lean on or cry on, or just to give advice in specific situations. How much of Case Keenum's presence was a factor in CJ Stroud's performance, we'll never know. I think that to rest Case Keenum away from playing football, you'd have to acknowledge that, hey, he made $3 million last year in a pretty cushy position. Mentoring Caleb Williams, being the emergency backup on game day. I think that Case Keenum probably likes that job. And if maybe he hasn't even really thought about whether he wants to go into coaching or not, or whether he's ready to retire. He's only 37 years old, which is a shock when you consider the fact that he was at the University of Houston for 6 years. He's drafted in 2013. And I just, in my mind, I thought of him as a guy who was already 40 years old or so. Case might play 5 more years as a backup quarterback. And I know, like, money doesn't drive all things, but $3 million a year to be a backup quarterback is a pretty cushy gig. Not to mention, he gets those backup quarterback ads from Progressive or whichever insurance company he does. Nice little paycheck there and a little bit of notoriety. If they find a way to get Case Keenum into the organization, I think it would be awesome. I would doubt that we see it this year. I think Case Keenum probably plays a football for a few more years, if only just because, not leaning on any actual inside sources or anything. That just seems like the most logical thing. As far as the trade, I promised the trade news. This is notable. So the Tennessee Titans pull off a trade for a player-for-player trade. T'Vondre Sweat, the gargantuan defensive tackle that at various times bullied various Texans interior offensive linemen, he's getting traded to the Jets for defensive end Jermaine Johnson. And as far as I could tell at this point, it just looks like a player-for-player swap. It really makes sense from the Titans and the Jets' perspective, just in terms of scheme fit, that Robert Saleh plays a system very similar to the Texans, and there's not necessarily room for a huge hulking nose tackle type. Not that I don't think that D'Amico would shy away from that, but T'Vondre Sweat is massive. He's 365. He wants guys that can play nose tackle, but can also get upfield a little bit more, rotate him in and everything, maybe a little bit more of a pop athletically. I really like T'Vondre Sweat as a football player. I don't like him as a Texans opponent. So better scheme fit for him going to the Jets where they run a 3-4, and a better scheme fit for Johnson, who comes in to run Robert Saleh's system. It's going to be a lot more like the Texans. So great. Good for you guys. Good for the Jets. Good for the Titans. I don't want to sit here and act like kind of like a coward and say, well, the Texans' interior offensive line hasn't been all that tough or physical, so at least the level of difficulty twice a year won't be as bad. But I'll take it. I'll take it for right now. I would much rather be in a position where, hey, Texans' interior offensive linemen are a bunch of pipe-swinging badasses who are going to beat the snot out of everybody they face, whether they weigh 365 pounds or not. And then maybe every now and then they'll remember to block Jeffrey Simmons instead of leaving him unfettered into the backfield for the fastest sack of the year. I believe that remains the fastest sack of the season, that first game versus Tennessee, when the calls got mixed up on the line. And maybe that was CJ's fault. Maybe it was the center's fault. We don't know. But they done screwed up. And Jeffrey Simmons got it in the backfield just completely unchecked. The trade doesn't move the needle in terms of the division for the Titans right now. At least as of now on FanDuel, they are dead last to win the division at plus 900. The Jaguars and Texans are tied for first at plus 165. And then the Colts, third favorite there at plus 340. That feels about right, especially when you consider the fact that the Colts don't have a healthy quarterback in the building. Anthony Richardson is now, according to Chris Ballard, cleared to play football. Remember at the end of the season when people were wondering why they were playing Phillip Rivers instead of Anthony Richardson? Richardson had gotten hit in the eye with an exercise band that had snapped off, and I think the metal part of the attachment hit him in the eye, broke his orbital. By the end of the year, he could see, but pretty much just straight ahead. He was in no condition to play football. He's healthy for now, but he gets injured with alarming regularity. There's reports that he's requested a trade or wants a trade out of there, but the Colts are sitting in a position where Daniel Jones says he's going to be ready by training camp. He's got a torn Achilles. That's great. I'm glad that he feels that way. Good for you. We'll see. People recover from Achilles tendons faster than they used to, but we'll wait and see on that, and maybe they feel good about Riley Leonard. But the Colts, uncertainty at quarterback right now, including the fact that we don't genuinely know if Daniel Jones is really that much better than what he showed in New York, and he's coming off an Achilles tendon tear. The Colts don't scare me right this moment. If they end up re-signing Alec Pierce will remain a guy that I get pissed off at least once a game because they break him loose on a deep ball. That's the new T.Y. Hilton for the Texans when they face the Colts is Alec freaking Pierce. Send him somewhere else, anywhere but the Bills. I need the Bills to continue. I need the Bills to come to Energy Stadium next year with the same issues that they had last year, which was no viable threats on the outside. The other interesting thing that happened with the Texans yesterday was that what would we call it, a groundbreaking ceremony, some type of ceremony out in the Toro district in Bridgeland, Texas, where the new Texans facilities are going to be. And the biggest news to come out of this is really just these renderings, these artistic renderings of this incredible complex they're going to have up there for their new headquarters. It is beautiful. There's 3 practice fields just like there are now. There's an indoor facility that's much more of a field house than a bubble. I've seen it referred to as a bubble in a couple articles. From the rendering, it looks very much like a field house with a hard roof. And they'll have their practice facility in there, but they're also going to have room for over 15,000 spectators. And in the indoor facility, there will be enough room for multiple flag football fields and it's either 21 or 24 volleyball courts, which will be really interesting because the Texans are making a lot of youth sports initiatives, both in flag football and in volleyball. They own the Love Bee volleyball team, the pro volleyball team here in Houston now. So all of that is going to be a lot more maneuverable and less of a headache for the Texans, not just the players themselves, but the actual front office staff. And I know these are rich folks' problems, and I'm not acting like, oh, the poor Texans have to work at NRG Stadium where they're interrupted by the rodeo or World Cup or various high school graduations. And it is a pain in the butt, I know, for the people that work in the front office, including the fact that they just don't have enough space for all the people in their front office. They've got people working remotely instead of at the facility there. So from a fan's perspective, none of that necessarily really matters. I think the things that do matter from a fan's perspective, when you look at these renderings, and what's really impressive is just the comfort level at training camp, I think, is going to be incredibly different because they'll have permanent facilities out there. I'm guessing you're going to be able to go to the bathroom in a porcelain toilet instead of a plastic porta potty toilet. And we don't even have to mention all of the hygiene things that happen when you're going into a porta potty on a training camp day when it's maybe the 3rd week of training camp and it's 95 degrees out. It's going to be a much more pleasant experience. Strictly from a janitorial perspective, it's going to be a more pleasant experience. But then when it comes to watch parties, the training camp experience, various other things they're going to do throughout the year, I think that's where the fan experience is going to be improved. Watch parties that they might have just during regular season away games, all that's a lot more manageable. If you love going to training camp or events at the Texans facility and you live in League City, I apologize. If you live in Katy, or if you live up in Spring, or you live in Cypress, congratulations, because it's going to be easy as hell for all of those things moving forward. I've told you guys before about how much, as a player, I prefer the type of situation that the Texans are moving towards. And that's going to open up in 2029. So it's a few years lead time on this. But for multiple reasons, as a player, for one, I like the idea of having a short commute to work. If you've got a family and you want to be able to buy a relatively affordable house, but a nice house without having to pay Westview prices, you can still have a very short commute to work, but also have your family in somewhere nearby. I also think from a team building perspective, it's going to be much more likely that more guys live closer to each other. And this is the part that I think I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, but I really genuinely feel this way. In the NFL, there's some teams that have more of a collegiate vibe and atmosphere and culture to them. And some of it really does revolve around just guys being geographically closer to each other. It's easy to get together. It's easy to go over to somebody's house and hang out after practice, have rookies over for dinner, all of that stuff. It's less of a logistical nightmare if you got more guys living close to each other. And don't get me wrong, there's still going to be a lot of the young guys, especially, that want to live in closer to all the action inside the loop. But even if leaving the facility before you go to your apartment in Midtown or wherever you are, you can hang out with the people that are out there by the facility. Because somebody wants to have a barbecue after practice or something, everybody's right there. They can go over to it. So I think over time, that's something that's like a generational thing. But teams like the Bills, the Packers, the Ravens, I think, I don't know how much of the geography factors in and how the layout is there in Buffalo or in Baltimore, but those are teams that have always had a reputation of just it fosters maybe more of a tight-knit feel, partly because of the communities that they're in. So I like it a lot from that perspective. There's a quote from Glover Quinn. Let's see. He was out there. He said, "You got to deal with the rodeo this week. The circus was 1 week. Then you got Monster Jam. You got so many things going inside the stadium." It probably annoyed some guys. Sounds like it didn't annoy Glover Quinn as much. Glover Quinn's kind of a curious guy. I think he might have been like me. I kind of liked when all that stuff was going on because I would pester people with questions about, like, hey, how do you keep the? I would go in and talk to the guys putting in the dirt for the motocross or something like that, and ask how they keep the dirt down. How do they build all this stuff? When the circus used to come there, you could go in and you could find somebody to go take you up and show you all the animals up close. Same thing with the rodeo. Talk to some of the bull riders and everything. But that's me and Glover. There are other guys, a couple of guys who had some quotes about what a pain in the ass it is to always have people in there. And again, going back to the front office experience, those guys, the actual business people, the actual people that do real jobs, it's been a gigantic pain in the butt for them. So hopefully that filters over into the way the actual team operates. Now, on to actual football things, based mostly on things that Nick Caserio said at the Combine. My biggest takeaways from Nick's multiple appearances in the media this week are that, A, it's pretty obvious. Anybody watching this by now knows, all right, unless Nick is bluffing the best bluff ever, CJ Stroud's going to be the quarterback in 2026. It would be asinine, in my opinion, to try to trade him away right now, unless there was something going on behind the scenes that we didn't know about. But they're going to make no bones about it. CJ Stroud's the quarterback this year. It was interesting that Nick specifically said in 2026 he'll be the quarterback. I think any of the debate around CJ and the Texans is going to be largely about whether he gets an extension this year or not. I would prefer that the Texans keep a carrot on the stick for CJ Stroud and really make him go out there and prove it this year before he gets that extension. And I also would hope that, CJ himself might feel like, you know what? Look, I know I've had troubles with the offensive line. I know we haven't had a run game, but I know I'm capable of more than what I did this year and certainly what I did in the playoffs. I want to go out and earn that next extension. And I'll go out and play my butt off. And you know what? The money will be even higher next year because that's the way it works with cap escalations and matching other contracts. So that's what I would prefer. I don't know. If the Texans do give him an extension, I'm not going to say I'll be surprised if it's right up there with the top tier quarterback renegotiations like Trevor Lawrence and those guys. I won't be surprised completely, but I would prefer that if it is in some kind of an extension, that it's some kind of a compromise with maybe a shorter term, high dollar amount, but a shorter term or something that the Texans can get out from underneath if they have to. Best of all worlds, they just say, hey, both sides say, hey, look, we both think CJ says, I think I'm capable of more. The team says, you know what? We think you are too, and we're not afraid to pay you more next year. Okay? So we'll kick the can on down the road. Other big takeaway was this was maybe the most openly I've seen Nick Caserio talk about the need to upgrade the offensive line. Last year around the Combine, we had statements from the team from the end of the season until the Combine where it was almost sounded like Caserio and D'Amico, D'Amico was saying at one point, I apologize. D'Amico in the Combine last year basically said there needed to be a culture change. Caserio in season had said that it was a false narrative that the offensive line wasn't playing that well. And then boom, you get to the offseason, they got rid of 3 of their starters from 2024 on the offensive line. This year, Nick has come right out and said, there's gonna be some new faces. And I think I'll be disappointed if the Texans aren't really aggressive in trying to bolster the offensive line. The blueprint for doing it in one fell swoop, even before you get to the draft, is what the Bears did last year. Because the Bears traded for 2 veterans. They signed another veteran free agent. And then they also addressed the offensive line in the draft. And they improved a lot. And it made Caleb Williams look like a more viable NFL quarterback. Lo and behold, I think with the Texans, the pass protection is one thing, but it's the actual run game and getting something going to be a respectable run game. I'm not even asking them to be the best rushing attack in the league. I want them to be a good enough rushing team that they can run play action and actually put the defense in a bind, where now it's just too easy for defenses. Just kind of sit back. Not the linebackers and the safeties can just make their reads, and they're not overly eager to come up and stop the run. That makes it a lot harder to get those guys to bite on play action, and it's a mess. It's a mess when you're trying to just execute an offense. I know the sack numbers were down this year. A lot of that was on CJ Stroud and Nick Caserio doing a good job of getting the ball out of CJ's hands when he was under duress. I think that they still need to do a better job of giving him more options early in the down, addressing how they handle blitz. And a lot of that's on the quarterback, but it's also on the offensive line as well in terms of just actual pass protection. You know, the pressure rates were a lot lower, but if you look at the ESPN pass block and run block win rates, they were still near the bottom of the league. They did improve as the season went along. And some of those bad numbers in terms of win rate were really anchored down by the first half of the season when they were having a lot of problems. It's stabilized, but I want to see them have a force on the inside. I want to be able to say, oh, gosh, I sure hope T'Vondre Sweat gets traded to the Jets. I want to be able to not say that. I want to be able to say, oh, they got T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons. Yeah, we can handle guys like that. And then you're off to the races. It's easier said than done. Other big takeaway that Joe Mixon's likely a goner. I mean, Nick Caserio said, and I don't know if this is a verbal slip up or not, but he said, I think Joe Mixon had surgery this offseason. They don't have any clarity on it. And Nick said he wasn't trying to be evasive. And I told Sean Pendergast, I think Nick would be evasive about it if he were capable of being evasive. He would love to be in a position to be evasive about it, but I don't think he knows a damn thing about what's actually going on with Joe Mixon at any given point. So you can't move forward wondering what the situation is with your running back. You got to act as if he's not on the roster right now. So maybe they hold on to him and hope for a medical miracle or something. But until they see that, they got to either cut ties and get that $8 million in cap space or keep him on the roster, but address the running back position as if Woody Marks and Jawar Jordan are your only option, and British Brooks are your only options right now. So get a guy in free agency, get a guy in the draft, whatever it might be. I'm just not. I've lost my patience. I'm not going to spend a 4th season now wondering if maybe this is the year they'll get their run game going. Maybe everything will come together this year. I can't do it. I'm an old man. Look at me. Gray hair. I know it doesn't look as much. I go to the barber and I'm like, what the hell is this? Wait, no, that's not how it looks. There's gray hair all over the place. Sometime before I die, I could be dead 3 years from now. Can I just get a rushing attack? Can I at least be able to say, oh, okay, I can evaluate CJ Stroud now with either a good performance or a bad performance because I saw that he had a good offensive line in front of him and a prodigious rushing attack. This is what I want to see after the season. I want people to be saying outside of Houston, well, shit, I mean, CJ had a good year, but look, they were the number 3 rushing attack in the league. He had that awesome offensive line in front of him. Of course, those are the kinds of rich folks' problems I want to have. So where I'm arguing with people from other fan bases about how, no, CJ Stroud is actually a really good quarterback. It wasn't just that they had an awesome rushing attack, that Jadarius Price had rookie of the year or something, or that Woody Marks caught 70 passes and he had 1,500 yards all purpose. David Montgomery might be available. We'll talk about potential free agents here in some of the coming episodes, but David Montgomery might be available as the Lions have they've got too many good football players, and they got to start shedding some of these. And meanwhile, Jahmyr Gibbs is playing incredibly. That David Montgomery might be able to come to the Texans, which would be really cool, because when the Texans drafted Woody Marks, what I thought was, oh, this can be, with Joe Mixon and Woody Marks, this could be like it is in Detroit with Montgomery and Gibbs. And then all of a sudden, Joe Mixon was MIA. Now you could actually just go get the actual real McCoy and David Montgomery. I like it. Thanks, everybody, for watching or listening to the Believe in Texans podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. If you're listening on Apple, please give a 5-star review and some nice comments or something. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on another podcast service, subscribe as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.